Hi friends, it's Abby from OP, and this is your monthly craft kit workshop walkthrough. I hope you all had a super fantastic winter break. I know I did. It was very restful, super relaxing. Now we can get back to business. Our craft kit workshop for this month is DIY Pottery. In your bags for DIY Pottery, you should have your instruction sheet, of course, 3 sort of crumpled sheets of wax paper, and these are really important because you are going to be working on top of the wax paper when we actually use the clay, and that's going to prevent your table or whatever surface you're working on from getting stained, because this is like orange. It's not like orange, it is orange air dry clay, and that does mean that your hands are going to be a little bit orange while we're doing this, but that's okay. Sometimes crafts are just messy. Speaking of clay, you're going to need your plastic bag that has a big old chunk of clay in it. We have 2 sculpting tools. I believe that when we are limited with the tools that we use, we have a chance to become even more creative than maybe we were before. This one's double-ended, and it has kind of a wider patterned tip here, and then a slightly thinner patterned tip. So I bet you could use these to kind of carve lines or to roll and make an impression. And my other tool is just this like really simple pointed stick, basically. And this is going to be really helpful for doing any holes, any sort of line work. Maybe I could use the back end to do stamping of some kind. So there's going to be a lot of options, and I'm really excited to see what yours are too. Next up, you should have a rolling pin. We're going to be making very tiny pots, so this very tiny rolling pin should be just the right size. Though it is very small, it's very cute. The second to last item in here are these stamp tools, because I know the carving stuff isn't everyone's favorite thing to do, and it does take some practice to get used to carving something in clay. But with the stamp, you can just boop, one and done. So I put these in here for you to use if you would like them. I have a moose, which is really cute, just a little, I don't know if you can see it, tiny moose. And then I also got this cute little teacup. And then this one doesn't have a design on the front, but it does look just kind of like a flower. You can also use any sort of cool patterned object that you find around the house. If you want to make your own stamp tools, that's totally an option. Just make sure that whatever you use ends up actually being something that you're okay sticking in the clay. Because again, it's very orange and it likes to make other things orange. The last item in your bag is going to be the toothpicks. So now that we got all of our stuff out of our bag, we can get started. Before we actually pull the clay out, you're gonna wanna go grab a shirt that you don't mind maybe accidentally getting a little bit messy. This, I've said it a million times, this clay is going to stain your stuff. So make sure you're wearing a shirt that you don't mind getting a little bit orange. So this clay is going to be what we're using for all 3 of our pots. And so we're gonna need to divide it up. Take your clay, put it out in front of you. Maybe kind of mush it around a little bit so it's kind of evenly shaped, like a big old thick pancake. And once you have something kind of like this, what we can do is grab one of our toothpicks, and you're going to divide this into 3 pieces. And you can do it whatever way works for you. These don't all have to be like exactly even, but what I do is I have my clay here, and I go in the middle and I just do 1 line down. And then from that top line, I do like a Y, but I try and make it so that each of these thirds, because that's what we're making, are about the same size. So I'll go there, there. So now I have like just generally 3 pieces. And then you can kind of tear off the chunks that you need, kind of going by those lines. So I have my first lump of clay. What we want to do, and you want to do this with any sort of clay that you prep to work with, and we're not firing this, like we're not going to put it in like the big kilns that they have to fire it and make it really hard. We're gonna let these air dry. But no matter what, even if you're not firing it in a kiln, you always wanna make sure that all of the air is out of your clay before you use it. Because if your clay, when your clay dries, any bubbles that are trapped in there will crack your clay, because as it dries it shrinks and it messes with the structure. So, you've wedged your clay, you have this adorable little orange lump. See how orange my hands are? And now we can get into how to make pinch pots. Pinch pots are exactly how they sound. They are pots made by pinching the clay into place. And they're usually pretty quick. You can get really creative with them. It's a really good technique to use for making an abstract piece if you want it to be kind of like lumpy or wiggly, or maybe higher on one side than the other. There's a lot of options with it. It's a super creative way to make a pot. You always need to have a good idea of what you're gonna make before going into whatever type of pottery you want to make. Because if you're gonna make a plate, you're gonna start off differently than you would if you're gonna make like a tall vase, even with pinch pots. So for example, I'm gonna make like a dish of some sort, like a tray. So I kept mine like a pancake form, and I'll be able to pinch it out into the shape that I want a lot easier now that it's kind of flat already. But if I wanted to make something taller, like a jar, I would probably I would squish it up into a ball, so I'd have a little bit more height. So you can use your 2 fingers here and your thumb, your whole hand, whatever works for you. The most important thing is to make sure that you don't let your clay get any thinner than the width of your pinky finger, otherwise it's not going to hold itself up very well. And it's also a good idea to pinch from the middle out instead of starting at the edge, and that's gonna help it be one kind of even thickness throughout the whole thing. So you can see I'm just pinching in kind of a circle around the base. Oh, I forgot to mention earlier that you're going to want a cup of water somewhere nearby, because water is going to be really helpful for rehydrating your clay if it gets a little dry and sticky, and also for attaching different pieces of clay to each other, which we'll get into later with our slab pots. Make sure when you're doing this, you're being really careful not to get water or clay on any of your devices, because that's going to be a huge bummer. I have, as you can see, there's a lot of cracks just from the clay naturally drying out, so I'm using just a little bit of water to rehydrate. If you use too much water, it can get really sticky and really goopy, and that's really hard to work with. So make sure you're only using just a little bit of water at a time. I'm thinking that this will probably end up being maybe a coaster. I really like coffee. So I have really big coffee cups. Not all of my coffee cups fit on all of my coasters. So here we go, I'll just make my own. So as you can see here, I've been using some water to kind of smooth out some of those wrinkles, and it's working really well. So really, once you get the general shape and texture that you want, some people really like the cracks. You can use tools to decorate them. Use this one to make sort of a pattern if you roll it through, which is kind of neat. I don't know if you can see it there. Or you can use it to like push on the edges and to make a design on the rim. There are so many options. So get your shape, decorate it however you want. You can use toothpicks to carve designs into. And then once you get your pot the way you want it, let it dry. You're gonna wanna let it dry for at least, I wanna say at least 24 hours, if not like 2 whole days. And that's gonna make sure it dries all the way. Moving on, pot number 2. We're gonna go over how to make slab pots. So we're gonna take off our second hunk of clay and our second sheet of paper. And you're gonna do the same thing you did before. You're gonna wedge it, get all the air out of it, make sure it's good to go. You wanna think about what you're gonna make, of course. But in this case, It's going to be most helpful to think about whether you want like a square or a rectangle shaped pot or a circular pot. You're going to pancake it out with your hands, almost kind of like what we did with the pinch pots. And then you're going to set it on your wax paper. You're going to take your rolling pin and you're going to roll out from the center to the edges. And you still don't want this to get any thinner than your pinky finger because, again, we want it to hold its shape. And also keep in mind these pots might be really small and that's okay. They're cute and decorative, really, more than anything else. So once you've spent some time rolling out your lump of clay so that you have this slab, it's a slab pot, you can start thinking about how you want to cut it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a circular little jar container thing. So to make a slab pot, you want to start out by making the base, and then you want to start out by making the walls. So I will take my toothpick, handy dandy friend, and I'm going to have a circular bottom for my slab pot. So I'm just going to trace a circle into my slab. So this is kind of just going to be the size of my base. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my toothpick and I'm just gonna cut it out. And if your toothpick is a little wobbly or maybe a little too thin, you can always use a pencil. Is a really great tool to just do a really simple cutout of a slab. So you can always use a pencil. If you have a tool that lets you do that, I'll try this out and see how it works. Oh, that's much better. You can use your tools to cut it out so that you have a base. And then take your fingers, smooth out the edges a little bit, and you can shape it a little bit if it's not like exactly the shape that you want. And then you have your bottom. And then you're gonna use the rest of your clay to make the wall. So for a circular pot, the walls are going to be just like a straight, like long rectangle slab. For maybe a square or rectangle pot, you're going to do 4 like slabs, and 2 are going to be shorter and 2 are going to be longer, or they're all going to be the same size, and then you're going to stack those around your base to make the wall. If your slab that's left over is a weird shape, or this like cutout is getting in the way, you can always mush it back together and then roll it out again so you have a clean surface to work on. I'm just going to make a straight cut across, and then another straight cut across. So I have this slab. There are 2 things you need to do before you attach them. You need to take your toothpick and you need to gently scratch the edges of each side without bending it. You're gonna be a little more gentle. And then you also want to take your toothpick and you want to scratch the edge of your slab as well. And this technique is called the scratch and stick, because you scratch it, you put a little bit of water on the edge that you scratched, and then you stick it on. And the water and the scratches just kind of help everything come together so it's really sturdy. So as you can see, I have attached my slab wall to my slab bottom. And you know, my slab wasn't long enough to kind of cover the whole side, but I kind of like this little chair almost that it's kind of turning out to be. So maybe I will keep it this shape. Oh, what's neat is if you put something on the back, you can hang it on the wall like this and put like a little candle in there. There are so many options. It's so cool to see when creativity just happens. Actually, I'll test a stamp out on this one and we'll see how it works. Right here. Oh, that looks so cute. So these are really cool. I wonder if you can see that, but I just stamped the teapot on the bottom and it looks really nice. Cool. So that is the basics of a slab pot. The final pot that we're going to work on today is called a coil pot. A coil pot is called a coil pot because it is made out of just one really long rope or coil of clay. The preparation for the coil pot is a little different than the others because instead of making a base and rolling like everything out flat, we're going to kind of squeeze our clay until we have the beginnings of a rope. And then once we get it kind of long, we're going to set it down on the table We're gonna start to roll it with our hands. With coil pots, you don't want your coil to be any thinner than your pinky finger. That's kind of your ceramicist's best friend. I don't know if ceramicist is a word, but I'm gonna go with it. Ceramic artist. There you go. I'm going to cut it in half because once it gets really long, it gets kind of hard to roll, so that I can keep on rolling this. And while I'm rolling it, I'm gonna think about what kind of pot I wanna make. So maybe for this coil pot, I'll make like a tall vase or like a container or something. You're going to use part of your coil. I'll just start with this one first, and I'll roll that one out later, to make the base. Don't forget to scratch so you can then stick. Just take your tool, just do a bunch of loose scratches. So see how I just kind of scratched all along the edge? You're gonna take your water, just a little bit, and you're just gonna get your coil all wet. So now it's gonna stick to itself really well. So you take the top end and you're just going to slowly start to roll your coil until you get the size of the base that you want. And once you get this flat cinnamon roll disc, you can do one of two things. You can either leave it and you can have the coil swirl be a part of your decoration for your pot, or you can kind of pinch it out together and make it a little bit more cohesive. I'm gonna kind of do that. I'm not gonna completely get rid of the swirl because I think it's cute, but I am going to flatten it out a bit. So you have your other coil. Curl the rest of your clay around the same way you did before. But instead of going just flat and around, you're going to go around and up. If you have a dangly edge on this one here, you can connect them and just kind of mush them together so you have one whole coil. Oh, don't forget to scratch and stick. Get it wet. So I have my coil, my base, and I'm just going to slowly start coiling it around the outside edge of my base until it starts stacking on top of itself. And you can take this part to kind of make the top maybe a little bit thinner or wider. You have so many options, so just go with what feels right. So then you should have something that looks kind of like this. Mine's a little bit short, but that's okay. If you are worried about it being too thick, you can always roll out your coils more. And I'm going to do something similar that I did to the bottom, is I'm just gonna take my hands, get them a little bit wet, and I'm just going to start kind of smushing it together with my fingers. And that way, like I said before, I don't lose the cool coil in the design because I think that's really neat. And you have your little pot. And then of course, decorate, use your tools, get in there, stamp it, do whatever you want to it to make it yours. And make sure you give it enough time to dry when it's done. So that is what we have for today for DIY pottery. I hope you have a good time with your pinch pots, your slab pots, and your coil pots. And I hope you spend a lot more time decorating them and really getting into it than we could in this video. In the meantime, I'm so happy you were able to come and do this workshop with me or watch this video, do crafts with me. I hope that you continue to do stuff with us here at OP. Don't forget to check out our website. We have YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter as well, where we have all of our content, our workshops, everything that we have going on. I will see you next time. Until then, stay safe. Bye.